Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be doing a video about a character found in the second half of the book of Isaiah, which by the way is chapter 40 through chapter 66. That is very much a figure of controversy and has been actually for a very long time between the debate of Jews more for modern Judaism or traditional Judaism and those who embrace Jesus Christ as the Messiah, Christians. Okay. The New Testament quotes the book of Isaiah second most, besides the Psalms, it's the most quoted book in the New Testament. And many of the prophecies about the servant of the Lord in 2nd Isaiah are said to be fulfilled in Jesus Christ in the New Testament. And even ones that aren't in the New Testament, there's many that just clearly are about Jesus, at least according to how the New Testament paints the picture of him. Okay. Anyways, this is really the argument. The argument, those for more modern traditional Judaism that reject Jesus Christ as the Messiah, they say, the servant of the Lord is not Jesus. It is, in fact, the nation of Israel as a whole. It's Israel. Israel is the servant, not Jesus. Case closed. Okay. The other side, the Christians, will say, no, and I should clarify, not all of them say this, but many of them will say, no, it's not Israel. It's Jesus, that is the servant, okay? And there's this tug of war back and forth on that point. This probably deserves deeper study than what I'm about to give you, but I'm just going to spur you on for some food for thought by looking at some of the verses from 2nd Isaiah so we can have a better idea of what the truth really is, okay? Because what I think we're going to find when we look at these verses, that the answer to the question of, is the servant of the Lord Israel or is it Jesus? The answer is simply yes, okay? What I'll do first is I'm going to look at a couple of verses that are in very heavy favor of the more modern Judaistic, traditional Judaistic perspective that the servant is, in fact, the nation. Couple of verses here. Isaiah 41, verse 8. But thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Israel, the servant, okay? Let's see, Isaiah 42, actually let's go to 43, 10. Ye are my witnesses, saith the Lord, and my servant, whom I have chosen, that ye may know and believe me and understand that I am he. He's talking about the nation. And again, the pronouns are plural. Ye are my witnesses. You might not see that unless you're reading the Hebrew or the King James, but ye is second person plural. So he's clearly talking about a bunch of people, okay? And even in, there's more, there's plenty more in Isaiah 44 and 48 and 49 that would make that point clear. But it's funny, when we get to 49, we see something very interesting. What we see is that God calls the servant Israel again. But then he goes on, God himself and the servant speaks and makes it clear that the servant is distinctly separate from the nation of Israel, and in fact serves to bring back Israel to God and to redeem them. Okay, actually, before I go there, in Isaiah 42, since we're going to now talk about the other perspective, the idea that it's a singular entity rather than a plurality, rather than the nation as a whole, you have in Isaiah 42, behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him, singular pronoun. He, singular pronoun, shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles, etc., etc. It says, he shall not fail nor be discouraged till he sets judgment in the earth. The isles shall wait for his law. It even says down here, the Lord tells him that he's going to give him for a covenant to the people. Verse 6, I have called thee in righteousness, will hold thine hand to keep thee, I will give thee for a covenant of the people, a light for the Gentiles. Okay, this is clearly a singular person. But now when we go to chapter 49, we're going to read this a little bit, because we're going to see this phenomena unfold before our eyes. Okay, so verse 1 goes, listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from afar. The Lord hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft, in his quiver he hath hid me. So here you go in verse 3, you have the modern Judaistic perspective definitely upheld. Verse 3, and he said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. So that's clearly, Israel is the servant, right? Well, it's interesting because he goes on. The servant speaks. Then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught, and in vain. Yet surely my judgment is with the Lord, and my work with my God. And now the Lord speaks about the servant. And now saith the Lord that formed me from the womb to be his servant. Now, excuse me, this is this servant still speaking. To bring Jacob back to him, though Israel be not gathered. Yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. Okay. So we have the first idea here that the servant is Israel, but that yet he's separate from them because he's going to bring them back. And here God is going to confirm that in verse 6. And he said, speaking of God, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. So the one whom he called the servant, being Israel, in verse 3, he says now he's separate from the nation. And yet he's going to redeem the nation and bring them back. So, and again, like we saw in 42, he was going to be given as a covenant to the people. It says that right down here again. Verse 7, thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, and his Holy One, to whom man despises, to him whom the nation Israel abhorreth, to a servant of rulers, kings shall see and arise, etc., etc. It says in verse 8, I will preserve thee and give thee for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, to cause thee to inherit the desolate heritages. Okay, so it's clear that this servant here is being shown as singular, but also as plural. So once again, is this servant the nation, or is it a singular person? And I said the answer is yes. And that's because it's clear this servant is somebody who is Israel, but it's somebody who is representing Israel. Okay? It's somebody who stands for them. It's somebody who, as it says, is going to redeem them, okay, who is their spokesman. Okay? It just doesn't work to say that the servant is Israel and as a collective nation and not a singular person, because it's clear right here, and in Isaiah 42 and even in Isaiah 52 and 3, that it's a singular person representing that nation. Okay? And then in 54, it turns from servant plural, or excuse me, singular, to servants plural. And those are the ones who accept the sacrifice that chapter 53 talks about. Okay? So there'll be more on this. I'll do another video, a part 2. But keep in mind the idea here that you can't say that the servant is Israel alone and not a singular person, nor can you say that it's just a singular person. It's the servant of the Lord is a dynamic figure in Isaiah, the second half of Isaiah, and he's shown to be both the servant sometimes as a plural nation and also as the singular person who represents them. All right, so that's all for now.